The wind blew dry and restless through the brittle grass of Bittercreek, whispering rumors of things best left unsaid. It was the kind of town where people remembered your grandfather's debts and your father's sins, and judged you for both. When Elias Mercer rode in on a weather-worn gelding, nobody asked where he came from, but everyone watched. He wore a battered coat, dust-covered boots, and the sort of silence that made men nervous. The sheriff gave him a long look outside Miller's General, then returned to sweeping dust off his porch with the same indifference he gave most things. Bitter Creek had seen its share of drifters. Most didn't stay. That was the way they liked it. But Elias wasn't just passing through. He traded a silver coin for a room above the saloon and worked sweeping out stalls behind Jeb Turner's livery. It was hard labor, thankless and rough on the back, but Elias didn't complain. He never did. His hands were calloused, his speech minimal. He nodded when spoken to and kept his eyes lowered. The kind of man who looked like he carried too many ghosts and was careful not to add any more. On the third day she came. Margaret Langford rode into town on a white mare, dressed in black with her silver hair pinned high. The widow of Langford Ranch was a figure both admired and feared, not just for the thousands of acres she commanded, but for the sharpness of her tongue and the fact she never remarried after burying her husband 20 years ago. She walked straight into the livery, looked Elias square in the face and said, "They say you're quiet and you work hard. That true?" "Yes, ma'am." "You know horses?" "Well enough." "Good. I have work. More than just stalls. You'll ride with me tomorrow. Sunrise." She didn't wait for an answer. Elias tipped his hat, said nothing. But he didn't sleep much that night. Something about her eyes, the way she saw right through him like a ledger left open, made his chest tighten. At dawn, they rode out together. She didn't speak for the first 5 miles. Then, just as the sun crested over the hills, she said, "I need someone I can trust. Not just to ride fence, but to be honest when I can't afford lies." Elias said nothing at first, then, "You always hire strangers to be honest?" "No," she said, "but desperation changes a person's patterns." They rode the perimeter of Langford land, 18,000 acres of grazing hills, cottonwood-lined creeks, and barns that had stood longer than most marriages. Elias worked. He didn't ask questions. He listened. Margaret tested him, gave him tasks too big for one man, decisions without clear right answers. He passed every one. By the end of the week, she invited him to stay in the foreman's cabin. "You'll keep to yourself," she said, "but you'll answer when I call." "Yes, ma'am." He moved in that night. Later, as he stood on the porch, watching dusk settle over the valley, Elias lit a cigarette with shaking hands. The hills looked soft in the fading light, the willows near the creek bending like mourners. He hadn't come to Bitter Creek looking for salvation, but it was starting to feel like the land might demand it anyway. 3 weeks passed. Elias rose before sunrise, rode fence lines, mucked out stalls, patched barns, and did every task Margaret handed him without complaint. He was efficient, invisible, and never crossed boundaries, physical or otherwise. Margaret watched, always. She wasn't the kind of woman to speak without purpose, nor the kind to give praise where it wasn't earned. But when she did speak, Elias listened. "Your work's good," she said one morning, over coffee and hardtack in the barn. "Better than most who come through here." "Thank you, ma'am." "I'm not just being polite." She paused. "I have a proposition for you." Elias set his cup down. "Go on." Margaret's gaze was sharp. "I need a husband." The silence that followed was heavy enough to knock dust from the rafters. "I beg your pardon?" Elias asked, voice steady. "A husband. In name only," she clarified. "Legal, binding. No obligations beyond what I lay out. You'd retain the Langford name, have rights to the property, learn to manage it as I've done. When I die, it becomes yours. I'll see to it in writing." Elias stared. "Why?" Margaret looked out the barn door, eyes narrowing on the hills. "My brother's sons are sniffing around. The will reads vague if I die unmarried. They'll split it up, sell it off to the highest bidder. I've built this land. I won't see it carved up and gutted by men who never touched a cow in their lives." "And me?" Elias asked. "I'm no more family than they are." "But you're here," she said. "You work. You don't ask for more than you're given. And you look at this place like it matters. He stood slowly. You don't even know who I am. I know enough. You came from some place you're not proud of, and you don't drink yourself stupid every night trying to forget it. That'll do. Elias folded his arms. And if I say no, you keep the foreman's cabin, keep your job, but you'll be gone before winter. And if I say yes, you'll sign the papers tomorrow. We'll be married by Thursday. Quiet. Just the judge and a witness or two. Nothing more. She looked at him fully then. I don't need love. I need legacy. You need safety. Seems fair. Elias didn't answer right away. That night he walked the pasture alone. The moon lit the grass like silver. The willows whispered as always. He thought of the years he'd spent running, thought of the bounty that might still trail him like a shadow, thought of what it might feel like to stop. He returned to the house before dawn. Margaret sat in the parlor, ledger open, pen in hand. I'll do it, Elias said. She didn't smile, but she closed the book. Good. Wear something clean. They married on a Thursday. Judge McCall read the vows with a voice like dry timber. No guests, no rings, just ink on paper and two signatures that tied a stranger to a legacy. Margaret wore gray. Elias wore his only white shirt, freshly laundered and still wrinkled from its long nap in the drawer. Mrs. Potter, the housekeeper, served as witness. Afterward, they shared coffee in the parlor. Then Margaret handed Elias a brass key. To the north barn, she said, and to the cellar beneath it. That's where the old ledgers are kept. If you're going to manage this place, you best start with the past. Elias nodded. He took the key and rode out that afternoon. He didn't ask questions. He never did. The north barn stood quiet and still on the edge of a grazing field. Inside, it smelled of hay, horse sweat, and dry earth. He found the trapdoor beneath a stack of old harnesses. The cellar was cool, packed with rows of crates and oil lamps. Most were filled with books, maps, names, transactions dating back to 1834. Langford history, documented in ink. But in the far corner, beneath a faded tarp, Elias found something else. A wooden cross. No name. Just a date carved into the base. 1887. He stared at it for a long time. Something about it made his breath come shallow. He brought it back to the main house, tucked it behind the tool shed, and waited until dusk to ask. Margaret sat on the porch, watching the sky fade. There's a grave marker in the barn, Elias said. She didn't look at him, just sipped her tea. Child? He asked gently. My sister, she said after a long silence. Younger than me by 3 years. She drowned in the creek during a flood. I was 13. Elias waited. She was buried near the willows, Margaret continued, but the river moved, swallowed the bank and everything on it. We put that cross in storage. My father couldn't stand to see it empty. I'll build her a new marker, Elias offered. Margaret looked at him then, eyes hard. Why? Because she deserves it, and so do you. They didn't speak again that night, but the next morning Margaret brought him a bundle of cedar from the storage shed. No pine, she said. She hated the smell. The first time Margaret didn't come down for breakfast, Mrs. Potter brushed it off. She has her days, the housekeeper said, pouring Elias coffee with a practiced hand. The cold makes her bones ache. But when Margaret missed supper too, Elias climbed the stairs. She was in bed, eyes closed but not sleeping. A half-finished cup of tea sat cold on the nightstand. Her silver hair lay loose on the pillow, and for the first time, she looked small, like the weight she'd carried for decades had finally grown too heavy. You should have told me, Elias said softly. She didn't open her eyes. What good would it do? You can't run a ranch from a sickbed. I did today. Her lips curled faintly, from under 3 quilts in a thundercloud. He sat in the chair beside her bed. Let me help. All of it. Not just the fences and feed. The books, the deals, the hard parts. Margaret opened one eye. You offering to be more than a husband on paper? I'm offering to be a Langford, he said. That was the first time she smiled. By the end of the week, Elias had taken over the ledgers. He sat at the desk she used to command, copying cattle counts and shipment records by lamplight. Margaret dictated from bed, voice sometimes strong, sometimes cracking. He visited the pastures daily, spoke with the ranch hands, many of whom had never heard her voice, only seen her silhouette on a distant porch. Elias didn't pretend to be her. He just got the work done. By the end of the month, he'd earned their trust. One morning, she called him into her room. A thick envelope rested on the bed beside her. "My lawyer sent it," she said. "Revised will. If I die tomorrow, silver belongs to you. No one can contest it." He nodded, throat tight. "There's one condition," she added. "You can't sell it. Not even a sliver. Not for 20 years. Elias looked her dead in the eye. "I'm not selling a damn inch." She exhaled slowly. "Then sign." He did. That night, after the fire had died low and the house was still, Margaret asked, "Why did you say yes?" Elias didn't answer immediately. "I don't know," he said finally. "Maybe I wanted to see what staying felt like. Maybe I was tired of waiting for the past to catch up. Or maybe I just looked at this place and thought, if it survives, maybe I do too." Margaret turned her face toward him in the dim light. "You were running when I met you." "Still am," Elias admitted, "but slower now. Maybe even in circles." She closed her eyes. "Good. Means you might finally see what's been chasing you." The house creaked around them. Outside, the willows swayed in silence. For the first time in his life, Elias Mercer wasn't planning to leave. The trouble started with hoofbeats. Not ranch hands, not locals. Too fast, too loud. Elias stood on the front porch of the main house, coffee in hand, and watched two riders crest the hill like a dust storm. The lead rider was lean, sharp-eyed, with a black duster and the kind of smirk a man earned surviving backroom brawls and border skirmishes. The second was younger, twitchier, but carried himself like a man with a knife hidden somewhere. Elias knew the first man before he even dismounted. "Hello, brother," the man said, tossing his reins to a stable hand without looking. "Didn't think I'd find you playing house." Elias didn't smile. "Jonah. Still good with names, I see." Jonah Mercer looked around. "Nice place, big, quiet, perfect for hiding." Margaret appeared at the door behind Elias, wrapped in her shawl. "This him?" she asked. "Yeah," Elias said. "This is Jonah." Jonah tipped his hat. "You must be the missus. Congratulations. My brother always had a way with desperate women." Margaret's eyes narrowed. "And you must be the reason he keeps a shotgun in the coat closet." The smile dropped from Jonah's face. That night, Elias stood on the porch long after the lamps inside had dimmed. Jonah stayed in the bunkhouse, but his presence filled the air like smoke. Margaret joined him, arms crossed tight. "You didn't tell me you had a brother," she said. "You didn't ask," Elias replied. "You think he came here for you?" "He came here because something's gone bad, and he thinks I've got something left to lose." Margaret was quiet a long moment. "Do you?" Elias looked toward the willows. "Yeah, I do now." The next morning, Jonah was already in the barn talking to one of the ranch hands. Elias pulled him aside. "What do you want?" he asked. Jonah shrugged. "You've done all right, Eli. Married into land, got a dying woman handing you her kingdom. Thought maybe you'd want to share the luck." "This isn't luck, it's work." "Don't matter." Jonah's eyes hardened. "They're still looking for you, back in New Mexico. That marshal you shot? He ain't dead, and he remembers your face." Elias felt the heat rise in his chest. "I'm not running anymore." Jonah stepped closer. "Then you best be ready to fight." Margaret stood in the doorway of the barn. She didn't speak, didn't need to. Her presence alone made Jonah take 2 steps back. "You bring danger to this place," she said, voice like flint, "and you'll answer to me." Jonah laughed, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Hell of a woman you married, brother." Elias didn't smile. "I know." Elias woke before dawn, heart pounding like a war drum. Something in the air had shifted, the kind of stillness that came before a storm, or a reckoning. Jonah was gone. His bed in the bunkhouse lay cold, undisturbed. One of the stable hands said he rode out just before sunrise, said he was headed west, said he wouldn't be back. But Elias knew better. He found the note under a stone by the porch. "You always were slow to see what was coming. I'll be waiting. Bittercreek's gonna burn, brother. Either you walk away or you burn with it." There was no signature, none needed. Margaret sat in the parlor, a blanket around her shoulders, her eyes hollow. "He means it, doesn't he?" Elias nodded. "He's always meant it. Jonah doesn't bluff." She leaned back. So what now? I ride out, meet him, stop this before it spreads. Her voice shook. You might not come back. I might not, Elias said, but I'll try. She didn't cry. She didn't flinch. She simply reached out and pressed something into his palm. Her late husband's revolver. Polished, heavy, deadly. He always said the land was worth dying for. I just hoped you'd be the one to live for it instead. Elias kissed her forehead, the touch gentle and final. Then he saddled his horse and rode into the gray horizon. He found Jonah near the old Langford mill, the place where their father once whipped them both for stealing molasses and where the river still whispered secrets to the willows. Jonah sat atop a chestnut gelding, rifle across his lap. You showed. I always do. Jonah spit into the dirt. This is your last chance. Come with me. We rob that train in El Paso. Take the money, disappear. Like we planned before you found your new life. I'm not that man anymore. Yeah, Jonah said, and that's why you'll die here. The first shot missed. The second didn't. Elias fell hard, shoulder burning, blood slicking his shirt. But he rolled, fired twice. Jonah screamed. Then silence. Birds scattered. Jonah lay on the ground, clutching his leg, eyes wide with hate and pain. I should have finished you years ago, he growled. Elias limped to his brother and kicked the rifle away. But you didn't, he said. And now it's done. Jonah passed out before he could answer. Elias returned to Langford Ranch, bleeding, broken, but alive. Margaret waited on the porch, her face unreadable. You win? No one wins, Elias said. But it's over. She reached for his good hand. Then come inside. Weeks passed. Margaret grew weaker, and Elias took on more. Land records, cattle trades, payroll. By autumn, the ranch was his in all but title. By winter, Margaret could no longer leave her bed. One night, she said, you buried your past for me, but it never stays buried, Elias. I know, he said. When I'm gone, someone will come asking about that shootout near the mill. What happened? Who lived? Who didn't? I'll tell them the truth, Elias said. Most of it. Margaret chuckled softly. Good man. She passed before the first snow. They buried her beneath the willows. Spring came with rumors. Men asking questions in Cheyenne. A Pinkerton agent seen near Willow Creek. The past, restless again. Elias stood over Margaret's grave, hat in hand. I kept my promise, he whispered. I stayed. I fought. And I'll keep fighting. Behind him, Langford Ranch breathed with life, hands shouting in the distance, a mare giving birth in the stables, and somewhere down the valley, a letter unopened from a name Elias hadn't heard in years. The wind rustled through the willows like a voice too old to forget, and Elias knew the story wasn't over. Not yet. The wind had picked up just past dusk, stirring the dust along the Bittercreek ridge as two riders came to a slow halt. One was a woman, wrapped in a weather-stained coat, her eyes locked on the distant silhouette of the Langford house. No lights in the windows, just smoke rising from the chimney like a memory that refused to fade. She pulled an old frayed paper from her saddlebag, part map, part letter, all trouble. In the corner, scrawled in ink faded by time, was a name, Elias Mercer. Behind her, the second rider dismounted. He moved with the kind of quiet you learn in places where silence keeps you alive. Tall, lean, face shadowed beneath the brim of his hat, he struck a match and lit a cigarette with slow precision. This the place? He asked. She nodded once. He's here. Or what's left of him is. Been a long time. 9 years. Her voice was steady, but her fingers tightened on the reins. Long enough to build something, not long enough to forget what he took. The man blew a ribbon of smoke into the cold air. You still sure? I never stopped being sure. Below, Langford Ranch sat silent in the fading light, peaceful, sleeping. But some homes don't rest easy when old ghosts start knocking. By sunup, the man said, swinging back into the saddle, we'll know if Mercer's a myth or just a man who thought the past was buried deep enough. The woman said nothing. She just turned her horse toward the valley, and together they rode down into the dark, toward the willows, the whispers, and the truth waiting underneath. And so, Across these unforgiving lands, another tale drifts away with the wind. If this quiet courage, this stubborn heart touched you in any way, leave a like, share your thoughts in the comments, and pass this story on to someone who needs it. Don't forget to subscribe, because out here there are still so many truths left to tell, each one carved from pain, hope, and dust. This is Wild West Stories. Thank you for watching.